Hi everyone, this is Jake, Nadia, Buddy, and Sedona, and today we are actually going to do season 1 review of Twin Peaks. We're currently in season 2, which is way longer than season 1, and I know this is something that you guys have requested for us to do, so we wanted to kind of just break it down because it really feels like getting into season 2, they're very different vibes. Let's break down season 1, and then we'll do another review after we finish season 2.
Yeah, season 1 is really interesting because you have like the foundations made of the tone, and there's a weirdness to it, but it also feels like a little more straightforward. But it's also like riffing on this soap opera style, which I think they become a little more self-aware, maybe too self-aware of in the second season. But in the first season, it's balancing these tones, which is really interesting. And by the time of the finale of the first season, there's so much going on, so many things are happening that it's like, what even is this show? It's really interesting.
Well, it's so interesting because when you watch episode 1 of season 1, you would never be able to understand how weird it's going to get or how supernatural it's going to be. I think the music is really nostalgic. They repeat the same type of snippets. It's almost like snippets of playlist over and over again, depending on the vibe that they're going for. And some of it is like a little funny. You have that like heartwarming, sweet snippet of that same music when like something that is funny or awkward that's going on.
That's what I first fell in love with when I first watched the show, when I was like in high school. And it's that tone of like comedy and like tragedy that's mixed in such a unique way. That's, you have characters that are you love and also ones you love to hate. And but they're always interesting and sweetness. And of course, you could say this about a lot of David Lynch's like movies, that there's this kind of like old-fashioned sweetness, especially to the Dale Cooper character, who it comes across as like a 1950s. He's like a Boy Scout, and he comes into this like dark, twisted world, and it's all about the surface being pleasant and what's really going on underneath this pleasant small town. And it's just amazing. It's an amazing show. I mean, obviously.
And what is also interesting is just like the different characters of the show. You don't really understand them. They're very sometimes like the father and the mom, they're very disconnected, and you don't understand of the missing girl, which we'll get into, Laura. You don't understand why people behave the way they do until you go into the season.
Yeah, it becomes more supernatural as the show
Yeah, and then
on.
you would think, because like I said, the first episode, you would think that there's actual logic to the murder, and you realize it's less logical, not in a bad sense at all, but more in a supernatural sense. It's also funny. It's super funny. It's interesting how accepted we are and how accepted, we as audience, we are about how much of this is doesn't make any sense. And you kind of wonder if David Lynch had planned everything or just kind of improvised some things, because there is a little disconnect as the season goes on. Certain aspects, you're I don't know if that was meant to be this way or he was just having fun.
I mean, anytime it would say directed by David Lynch,
Well, I was just about to say, and then the episodes that are directed by David Lynch are the kookiest.
Yeah, and it's almost but I feel like the show relies on that because it's you have the writer's room, and you have Mark Frost, of course, who's the co-creator. Yeah. Mark Frost was more established in TV, production and writing, whereas David Lynch was coming from the more artistic, experimental filmmaking side.
Well, that's what I mean. It's very experimental.
But I think that's what makes it a great team, because you have these threads, this typical TV kind of pacing. And also I think what's charming about the show now is that today we have TV shows that feel like 8-hour movies split into 8 sections. So you watch an episode and you aren't really satisfied. It's not really made to be watched as an episode. Whereas you watch an episode of Twin Peaks or maybe older TV, you get a story in there, you get stuff out of an episode. And it's not just moving into the next thing, but it does have this great narrative momentum, I think. And then when David Lynch steps in there, it's almost like throwing a wrench into the system of what is he going to throw out there, or what is this episode going to throw out there that's going to change the dynamic of the show. And there's just some incredible imagery and just stuff that you don't expect to see in a TV show, and over the top elements, just this melodrama that you either love or hate. There are people who really can't stand that. But I think that the show is so earnest in how it approaches the material that it's like there's a lot of crying, like in the first episode. Like there's so much crying and the music playing over and but it's so earnest, and there's so much like love in the show with these characters. Like clearly there's a lot of love for these characters. It's not a cynical kind of show where they're making fun of these people. Some of them, maybe Nadine, they make fun of, but it's mostly like with a lot of interest and love in each of the characters. Like there's no character where I'm just like, yeah, I don't care about them or who they are. Like even I know this is in the second season, I think, but even the owner of the lodge, the guy who's like the mustache twirling villain, he has a scene out of nowhere where he's watching home movies at home and like getting all sad, and it's like, what is this scene here for?
What is the purpose of this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's humanizing. You may not like him, but it's like you can understand him maybe as a character. It's really it's very well rounded,
wholesome. And I think like a lot of scenes, they don't always have a purpose. They're just made to kind of not escalate the plot, but escalate the vibe, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's more so like I said, a kooky vibe, and a lot of scenes are there to kind of add on to the kookiness of it all. And what I think really makes a show stand out is that even though there's these horrific events going on, I think that Cooper, being a wholesome, earnest character, the police department actually is very wholesome, earnest, and also a lot of people there are wholesome and earnest, that even though this is brutal and they do go into like, there's a lot of explicit verbiage in the show that is gruesome.
It doesn't shy away from the darkness.
No, but at the same time, because of the relationship, because of the character development, because of just the perfect balance of comedy and obscure tragedy, that it makes it very fun to watch. And it's still, honestly, it feels like a family show, even though it shouldn't be.
Well, I think that's what's interesting, is that although there's a lot of moving parts, it's not a very socially conscious or complex show. Like when you look down to it, when you look at the fundamentals of what it's about good and evil. It feels very Stephen King in a lot of ways, where it's like there is this deep darkness underlying everything, and then you have the heroes, where it's like the FBI agent, the cop. It's very unique, where it's like the FBI agent is this spiritual like good guy, and it's kind of bizarre, but it works for the show. And I think, it does almost feel like a family show in that sense, but explores the darkness. And like we talk about this when we talked about, or I don't know, when we will talk about The Return, but when we rewatch it, Twin Peaks: The Return, I always say like no show made me laugh or be so scared in the same amount of time, just goes from, and it gets more extreme. And we'll talk about this when we review the second season later on, where the highs and the lows get broader and more extreme. And then in The Return, it's like you're really going into the darkness, but there's also a lot of light moments. And in season one, I think is just perfect in a way. It has the light, the comedy, and the darkness. And
I will say the villain, or quote unquote the killer, is not revealed in season one, which is
I think they didn't even know who the killer was going, like the writers. I'm not sure. You guys can let me know, but I don't think the killer was even, they wanted to reveal that ever. They were forced to reveal the murderer in the second season by the studio, or not the channel.
I feel like there was a lot of hints in season one, especially at the end, and when they did reveal it in season two, which we'll get into, it does make sense when you trace it back, in my opinion. But yeah, you guys let us know if it's something different. I will say some criticism that I have for the show before we get into the spoiler section. Representation lacking. There's one Asian woman, and I
think more in the second season.
There's some more criticism of that I really hated the way they went about her. I'm Washingtonian, so it kind of made Washington seem very, very not diverse, which is not my experience, especially the area in which this is filmed. I also don't know, because they played a little bit into the Native American mythology, which I feel uncomfortable with, because it's, feel like there's a little bit of a
ignorance.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to say it. There's a little bit of ignorance with that
Or
aspect.
playing into stereotypes. I mean, the whole show plays into stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't like that, obviously.
But I mean, some stereotypes works, stereotypical, when they actually like go into depth with the stereotype and try to flip it on its head, like
Well, I think
the
more
football
like
player who's sensitive,
more like
the
the minority stereotype
those
is really
stereotypes, yeah.
problematic. I also think that there is a little bit, as they explore the character of Laura a little bit more, there's a little bit problematic, more sexist portrayal of her, of almost like she did a bunch of different things that led her, like faulting her indirectly for why she ended up the way she did. So there is a lot of, it's not without fault, even though it's wholesome and everything else. There is a lot of criticism with a lot, these types of representation and dialogues that is added in there. But with that being said, let's get to spoilers. All right, so spoiler section. Let's start with Laura. Laura in the beginning is basically the center character.
She's the saint.
This
saint-like character that the whole town seems to have a connection to.
Yeah, but as the episodes go on, it's really revealed that people didn't really understand or know Laura. It's kind of goes into the sexism that I was talking about. She had a lot of sex. She was very wild and liked to party a lot, which I feel like that characterization of her is problematic because she gets SA'd apparently multiple times, and it's really gruesome the way she passed away. And so the way that they portrayed it, I interpret that as like almost indirectly stating that she lived a dangerous lifestyle, and of course she's gonna get here, and almost
I don't think the show condemns her. I think that other characters judge her.
Yeah, but they never really like take that away from her. It's almost like she's objectified the whole time. Yeah. Right? Like she's not like, she doesn't have any, like, her merits are surrounded by her sexuality. And when she's kind of deemed as quote unquote unpure, then it's almost like the character's like, oh, I didn't really know her, I guess, but it's like they knew a lot of other aspects that's almost dismissed. I do feel like, in season 2, there is some explanation that makes it less sexist about why they portrayed her the way they did, which we'll get into when we do the season 2 review. I really liked Cooper, obviously.
He's the standout like character in this whole show, where he's just fascinating to watch interact with these characters, and
not only
the whole fish out of water thing.
Yeah, but not only is he talented as an FBI, he's a city guy who falls in love with the small town vibe, and he also has a supernatural gift that he's very susceptible to energy, and he has dreams that really state a lot about reality, and he finds a lot of clues in his dreams. He finds a lot of clues in quirky methods, just like throwing rocks.
Well, exactly. I think that's probably in the second episode when they do that. Yeah. But rewatching this again, I noticed in the first episode, like, we establish a tone and stuff, but the second episode, which isn't directed by David Lynch, by the way, we really get the qualities we remember about Twin Peaks. It's like in the first scene, he's like, excuse me, that is damn good coffee.
Oh my God, yes, damn good coffee.
The quotes and the like quirky stuff that we really associate with Twin Peaks and with Cooper. And yeah, like what I love is how the kind of friendship between him and the sheriff, Harry Truman, was really sweet. You have the comic relief characters, Andy and Lucy, too, who are always in some kind of dramatic, tense situation, which is great.
You know what I like about Lucy, who's the assistant in the police police department, is that she first comes off as more kind of airheaded type, but then she's very smart at the end. You figure out like the way that she talks is a little like has a false impression. And then I love her character development because she ends up getting pregnant, finding her own person and her own voice through that experience.
Yeah, that's great as well.
Very great, like good character development,
Absolutely. For the friends of Laura, we have Donna and James.
And then you have your cousin.
Who comes in, but Donna...
Maddie.
Maddie, yeah. But Donna is really interesting, and her relationship with James, I really like. I think Donna actually gets more interesting in season 2 when she has a sudden character switch. But in season 1, it's like we're really rooting for her and James, even though their relationship seems sort of like
I'm not rooting for her and James.
no. Their relationship seems so broken because James was with Laura, but it's like they shouldn't be together, but it's like they feel like it's the right thing.
I liked them at first, but then as soon as she started smoking.
That's season 2. That's
not season 2.
Yeah. There's a sudden shift.
We should have just stopped season 1 because I'm getting those confused right now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, season 1 ends with the fire. What I love about these characters is you see kind of the old generation and the new generation who are kind of doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. You have Norma, who is, owns the diner, is very similar to Shelley, who is kind of having this terrible marriage. She's the waitress. She has this terrible marriage with Leo, who's insanely abusive. And she's, sleeping with Bobby Briggs. But Norma, is of course herself unhappy because the one she loves, Big Ed, is married to Nadine.
She is one of the biggest comedy relief of the show.
Nadine is brilliant.
Yeah, she has one eye patch, and then she's very like interesting in the way that she portrays like blinds. Like she has these ideas about the way that she wants to serenade her man, but then she's so wholesome and innocent at the same time, very like cringy.
Well, yeah, and you wonder that's part of they don't answer this probably until season 2. Like, why is he with her? You're kind of like, what is going on here? How did this happen? Leland in season 1 is a really interesting character because the way he's dealing with grief is very unlike the other characters. Dancing, the singing, the show tunes. I love how with Benjamin Horne, his colleague, how he's kind of like told to go away. They're like, we don't want you around. You're a liability now, because he'll show up like, I'm ready to work, guys. And
but then
he starts
cries while dancing. It's not like a joyful dance.
But it's tragic, but it's also funny. And one of my favorite scenes is the funeral scene where it's so sad. Like, it's really sad, but it's so funny too, because it's so over the top, and it's just that kind of magical tone that clicks.
Well, what's funny, or not funny, interesting, is that Laura's mom is very grief-stricken, as she's expected to be and everything else. But when the dad is grief-stricken, like, the mom is like very resentful. How dare you, are crying over our daughter? You were supposed to be taking care of this and this and this. And it's almost like, what the hell? Like,
there's more that we haven't seen, so we don't know the full story. Like, for instance, we haven't yet seen Fire Walk with Me, which I know is super important for the whole Twin Peaks story. I love revisiting these characters, especially, we're in Washington now, and just with the rainy season. And
I guess, like, for my notes, the only thing that I want to say, a couple things, is I put that the show really switches vibes around the funeral episode for the whole town when Bobby has an outburst. Mm-hmm. Because he's really, seems very chill and whatever until the funeral. And then, although it was hinted and depicted in previous episodes, we really see that the town has a lot of flaws, because I really felt like rewatching it, everything seemed perfect, almost too perfect. In the funeral episodes, you saw the cracks that, this town is not as perfect as it's first portrayed to be, not as wholesome.
It's all about the seedy underworld, and you have One-Eyed Jacks, and in the very sinister forces going on just below the surface. I think that's a really interesting look at this world, which is supposed to be this wholesome world, and there are wholesome elements, of course, but it's there's so much darkness with Benjamin Horne and all the money and dealings. And
oh, yeah. And then I also said that, I thought it was interesting, and I touched on this already about Laura's parents, about the mom being resentful of the dad's grief, but he's so grief-stricken in the funeral episode that he said, he hugs Laura's casket, and then the mom's like, don't ruin this for me too, basically. And it's just, really heartless. And it's interesting how that is. And we also get introduced to the secret society.
Yes. Okay. That is really interesting because there are certain elements to the show where I, rewatching it, going, it feels almost like a backwards view of the world in a way, where it's almost like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we have the sheriff, we have the FBI agent, and we have other business owners or people in the town creating a system that is outside the law, but they're doing good, and it's like in this system, you kind of see the agent Dale Cooper battling with what he knows is the correct way to do things and what he thinks is the most effective and correct or right way to do things. And it's like in our world, there are real problems with that. And so much corruption, and it's almost like Twin Peaks presents us with this pleasant fantasy about like there is the good pure FBI agent, there is the good pure sheriff, and they're fighting for goodness, and even in creating their secret societies, and it's almost
Well, it just reminds me of John Oliver. If you watch him, and we think he's great. Really breakdown of Law and Order and its depiction of cops.
oh yeah, propaganda and stuff.
Like and how it makes the show very nice to watch, and I mean wholesome as a Law and Order episode can be, I guess. But then really when you think of that as the point of view of all cops, and it presents real problem because you're basically stating that cops have every right to break the rules, and that's really problematic, right? Because in real life you are caught for breaking or not breaking the rules depending on like the corruption in there. In Twin Peaks, because of the secret society, because they go off the book a lot, it's depicted as a necessary action, and that's fine in the show surrounding thus far, at least, because like we stated, these people are wholesome, earnest, they want to do good, there isn't a corruption in their bones, they're very much stand their ground and really like advocate for their family and friends, right? And really seek justice in the most earnest manner one can, but it just doesn't translate to real life. And especially I think today's day and age, it does feel out of time with that kind of portrayal and aspect of it.
Yeah, and although I think it's reductive to look at David Lynch's perspective through a solely political lens, because I don't think that's a good way to view what he does. I think he operates on multiple levels, but I think that you could look at a show like Twin Peaks and say that it is a conservative, it reinforces conservative viewpoint, because the good guys are the traditional institutions, law enforcement. Interesting to look at it that way. I don't think that you could reduce the whole show down to that, but there is that element there which is unique discord between like what the show is presenting and what it's saying, and I don't think that makes it bad. In fact, I think it makes it even more interesting, and creates like an interesting dialogue. Yeah,
I don't think we can be done with this video until we talk about Audrey.
Right.
Audrey is a very special character, and she makes me laugh a lot.
Audrey's great.
She is a person who, by the way, do these kids attend school at all?
Or are they even in the 90s? Like it feels more, it is like the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, Audrey is like this stereotypical 1950s character, where just like the like Marilyn Monroe type character,
She is, yes.
But what is great about her is that she's a very active character and very one of the smarter characters on the show.
She is, and again, deceptively, because the thing is that you kind of see her first, and you just see like this is a girl who just wants to prove her dad wrong and to rebel against her dad. But then you see she has a very earnest motive, and she actually really cares, and she's probably, I would say, a little bit more earnest than even Donna, to be honest with you, because she has some values. I mean, Donna is very great, and she is best friends with Laura and everything else, but you do question later on as season 2 goes, especially her having a crush on the guy that like was sleeping with her best friend is questionable to me. But anyway, Audrey just wants to help, I think, and I think she at first seeks out to as a way to
rebel against her father, because her father is such a piece of shit. But I mean, she ends
But
up
I
like
think
wanting
it
to do
evolves
good.
into
Yeah.
like Cooper's influence in her life and her really wanting to do good and show Cooper that she is capable of like being his partner, which is really problematic because she is like 18, 17, and then
Well, and he basically is like,
in his late 20s, 30s
well,
maybe.
yeah, and he's like, no, which is like, thank God,
Thank
you watch it and you're
goodness,
like,
yeah.
oh, is this show about to get really weird? I mean, there's already those weird things with like Shelley is like clearly out of high school, but Bobby's still in high school. Like we assume all these
it's
characters
like a
are
couple
18.
years difference,
Yeah, we assume
maybe.
they're all 18.
We assume Shelley like dropped out of high school and then just like is 19 years old,
or
and there's maybe
something.
like a 2 years difference between them or whatever. Well, there are more characters to talk about.
That's the
but
thing. There's so many characters and so many things to talk
honestly,
about
this
the
video
show.
would be like 4 hours long if we did.
Yes.
So we try to cover as many as we could that we thought were impressionable. But let us know what you think. We can't wait to finish season 2 and then watch the prequel and then watch the return and then hopefully there's more. But we will talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.